Welcome back. We're here with Gina and with Brian, and we're going to do a little overview again over the couple of chapters of Jim Collins that we talked about, just to get back into understanding where we start off and then inform the conversation further in terms of how organizations can become excellent. Just as a quick reminder, this course is about principles of excellence, how you achieve excellence at the individual level, at the team level, and the organizational level. And we're going to further move into understanding how organizations can be excellent, can become excellent, and can stay and remain excellent. So thank you, Gina, for being here. Thank you, Brian. Let's just sort of recapture what are some of the insights that Collins has presented so far.
One, for example, is leadership matters. Having a level 5 leader that's humble really helps set organizations apart. And that was something that they didn't originally think was going to be that significant, and it spent quite a bit of time drilling into it.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, agreed. And I think the biggest attribute of that is when people follow without having to follow. It's not a forceful thing. It's something that is, organic to them because they see a vision and they want to follow through with it.
Okay. Is it the vision that is important that Collins is mentioning for organizations to be excellent, or what is it that makes organizations excellent?
One of the differentiators is this business of being humble as a leader and inclusive and motivating your employees and your team through humble leadership.
And why would humble leadership be motivating? What's the point there? What's important about humility? Because as we said, humility is not necessarily a key characteristic of any stereotype of business people that we have, right? And organizational leaders.
We found that it builds a greater sense of purpose and unity amongst the team because they're in a safe environment where they can really fight or discuss the hard facts and have tough conversations and know it's about the team, and it's not one single person that's getting all of the recognition for success.
So this humility piece would matter because it allows conversations to focus on solving problems, right, rather than sort of being right. And that humility has, combined with professional will, has the power to advance the conversations within the organization and confronting the brutal facts, right? That's another piece, another principle. So saying if you're not wedded to being right, then you confront the brutal facts as they are and you deal with them, right? And so that's another principle. I think that how does that? What do you recall from that?
Understanding your brutal facts and confronting that with your current reality is important. You have to understand where you are now to help that inform your future understanding of anything. So I think having a level 5 leadership that has that balance of passion, humility, can then help with the understanding of the confronting the brutal facts, because you have to have a climate or a culture of honesty that helps to breed you having to tell the truth as well. And that honesty then helps you confront those brutal facts in a way that makes sense so that you can then try to tackle them and move forward.
Okay. And what is critical to be able to create this culture that you're mentioning? What's there's a leader and then what else?
Trust. Trust was another one we talked about. Psychological safety,
right?
Not from Collins. We brought that in from the Project Aristotle,
right?
And having the right people is key.
And what is important? Having the right people, right? He's saying what is the principle that he's calling it?
Getting the right people on the bus.
Getting the right people on the bus, but the principle that he says is
first who, then what.
Right. First who, then what. What's important? Because we typically talk about getting the right people. And typically we mean, yes, we have a structure, we have a job description, and that means we're getting the right people, right? What is Collins saying that's so atypical to any type of organization when he says, first who, then what?
You're getting the people before putting them to work. That's the wrong way of saying it, but you get the people, you focus on the people first.
I think what's critical, what I want to also the students to remember here in some way, this is totally atypical of traditional organizations that start out with a strategy and then say, now we need the right people. This is actually, you start with the people and then figure out a strategy. And what I compare it oftentimes with is like, okay, let's say you want to have a great vacation. You could say, in the traditional way, I want to go to Greece. Let me see who wants to come with me to Greece, right? Or you could say, let me get the people that I want to spend time with, all my friends. And then let's get them together and have a conversation about where we want to go. And then maybe you come up with Greece, or maybe you come up with Spain, or maybe you come up with Florida or something. Which holiday, which vacation would you enjoy more?
The one that I'm with, the people I spend with.
That you want to be with,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
And it doesn't matter where you are,
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's going to be a good time,
Yeah.
right? So I ask and invite you students to also think about this in this way. It's like, oh, okay, this is what he means by first who, then what. And this is very critical because most organizations are suggesting we're going to go to Greece. Come with us. Or we're going to go to Spain, right? This is the metaphor in terms of using a strategy and saying we're going to produce computers or we're going to do this. Now, are you excited by this? Come on board, right? And oftentimes we talked about this, people aren't excited by that, right? Yeah. And with the conversation that we have about Simon Sinek and the power of why is sort of alluding to the fact that most people really, they don't have a higher purpose. They don't really understand why they're doing what they're doing. And so therefore they're like, oh, okay, I'm just here. And they're not the right people, right? And we talked about this in terms of the right people, is the people that are intrinsically motivated. They have a higher purpose. They have a why that resonates with the group. They're basically friends in that they have this shared purpose. And therefore they then determine where to go, right? And so I think this is a very critical piece to understand. There is the leadership, the professional will and the humility that are connected. There is the piece of the right people on the bus that are sort of the right people because they have this shared intrinsic motivation and the purpose. And then there are other pieces that Collins explains that we're going to get to in more depth now that are critical, that come as a result of having this leadership and having the right people on the bus. So we talked about confronting the brutal facts and that kind of culture. Like, how do you see that connect, and what is your own work experience? Like, how many times do you feel like at work you're actually working with a level 5 leader or you're working with the right people? What does that look like for you?
That probably confronting the brutal facts is probably the hardest part, you know, because you have to create that culture that allows you to be honest in a certain environment. You can have a great leader, which I do. You can have the ability to get the right people together, but having that right people and having a trusted environment for them then to be able to confront their current reality is a struggle sometimes, especially if, you know, are you open to change, you know, even if you're the right person, are you open to change that's going to take to move to the next level? So I feel like that, in my experience, has been the hardest part, is really having people understand and being comfortable with really getting down to the nitty gritty of confronting those brutal facts, things that are not easy to hear. You know, you can't point blame to folks because that then hurts the conversation and the honest environment.
We talked about this before we did it.
Yeah, so that's in my experience, is creating that climate and that culture that allows people to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, owning my own business, I see this in practice all the time. Especially in consulting business, you know, you're paid to provide the brutal facts to your customers, and the reactions sometimes are just to be blissfully unaware and continue on and not to tackle the hard facts. No, that's not every client by any stretch of the imagination, but it happens quite a bit, and because those are tough choices to make, and it's hard to do, and sometimes it's just easier to avoid than actually.
And why is that happening so often? You say you have a great leader, you would say, you say you might be the right person, but why is it then so hard to confront the brutal facts, even when you consider that to be the case?
Well, I think, to your point, I think it's hard for people to hear, certain things. You don't try to point blame, but it's hard not to see. It's hard to step outside of yourself and to really understand it's not about you per se, but it's really about the situation, how we can improve it. And, everyone's level of honesty is different. So when you come into the table with different perspectives, different experiences, folks who have been with the organization a longer time versus those who have been for a short amount of time, and then you bring in generational differences, it can cause someone to not look outside themselves, which they should, to address the issue and take it more personally.
Okay. Can I just ask you, when you say you have a great leader, what do you mean by being a great leader?
Well, for me, in terms of Jim Collins, is really that balance of passion and humility. I'm in the nonprofit sector, and so passion to the mission, and having a leader who is, an expert in our field. He's seen as that. He has a passion for our mission, but he's also humble in how he interacts with the rest of his staff. And I think that's important, so that we can see him, when he's in the room, it's not just the CEO plus us, it's all of us as our employees together trying to make a decision about something. I think that's important. But again, how that's received is a whole new ballgame in terms of that.
So let's assume you have a level 5 leader in your organization and you have the right people on the bus because they're all driven by the same purpose, intrinsic motivation. They want to be there, and then they decide maybe later where and how they're going. Why then would you say it's so hard for people to hear? Because what we established before is that humility is actually what allows people to hear, right? And oftentimes I think we may be deluding ourselves. I'm not saying you are, but it's like that to be the right person actually in Collins's terms is something different.
Right,
It's not being a functional specialist or an expert on something. It's actually something in a way that you're able to hear certain things differently, that you're humble and professionally willed, which means you want to learn. That's why you're actually looking to see the brutal facts. You want to hear them, right, rather than avoid them, no matter what the reasons may be, right? But does that resonate with you at all in any way?
Yes, it does. And I also think it's important to see how that trickles down to the levels. I think your CEO can exemplify level 5 leadership, but how that brings down to the rest of your staff, I think is where the disconnect may be. He may be fine in terms of wanting to confront the brutal facts, or executive team as a whole, and separate themselves and really humble themselves to that. But how does that trickle down and communicate to the rest of the staff, I think is important.
And what is happening in your organization if you're saying it's not necessarily the easiest thing to
There's a
confront the brutal
disconnect in the two-way communication between management and staff. Is our biggest
Okay, and then
thing.
how would you describe that?
I think, again, going back to creating a culture where you can be honest about certain things. And I think we are honest on a surface level, but not on the deep, brutal fact level that we need to be.
Okay. And again, why would you say? It's like, okay, you have the culture, you talk about the culture, but the point is, I think here, and in some ways, like an organization that is excellent is able at the individual level, and we talked about this in the team level, the leadership level, to sort of exemplify, and the right people are the right people, not because they know they have the expertise or something, but because they want the brutal facts. They want to have this conversation. And would you say that you don't have the right people there in the management level, that the communication is so difficult, or what's the
I think that's key. I think that's key. I think the shift in management over the last year has led to that disconnect in communication, or not everyone being on the same page as to exemplifying that level 5 leadership.
Okay. Interesting. How do you connect with that in organizations that you're working with? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. This is a very common challenge amongst organizations that we work with is communication between the leadership and the rest of the staff, and particularly not in all cases in government, but in a lot of places in government, it's particularly bad, and it's you're punished for you can be punished for confronting the brutal facts, and it's much safer not to do anything, and that's that it. There's a cultural effect to that where you just accept the status quo and don't do anything. And it comes out of self-preservation.
It may come out of many things, right? And we're making meanings about these things very quickly when we see it. I think Collins sort of calls this the biggest danger is being good, right?
Right.
Having some level of success, maybe being mediocre, right? And just being acceptance of that. It's like, okay, that's when you stop listening. That's when you stop
right.
confronting the brutal facts. And we say, you know, I'm comfortable, good enough, good enough. And good enough doesn't allow you to get to greatness or excellence, right? And grow and understand. And so I'm just exploring with you in what way that is a reality that you're experiencing, because I think the right people are just not the right people in the traditional way that we understand. The right people are the ones that are willing to grow, the ones that are willing to have these kind of conversations, right? And they are willing to sort of create solutions that are out of the normal, right? Out of the traditional conversations, and not playing it safe necessarily, because they actually have a higher purpose. They have an intrinsic motivation to contribute to something that is excellent. They're not happy with the status quo.
Right.
They're not happy with just having a job and going through the motions, right? So I think our understanding of the right people is very critical here, because a right person that is just showing up is not the right person in the way that Collins suggests it is. It needs to be more than that, right? And the fact that if you are interested in achieving excellence from the top down, like it starts with the leader, right? So if that is a possibility to be in your organization, that the level 5 leader might be there, he might want to and need to hear the brutal facts, right? And so he will need to hear that. He also needs to create, or she needs to create, that kind of communication channel that people feel like they can share it. If that is not happening, it doesn't matter what type of leader you have, because confronting the brutal facts is very hard, right? And so typically organizations then get stuck.
Sure.
Right.
And I think this is speaking also, students, to one of the bigger principles here of Collins, which is that these principles that he's proposing, they are connected. They are connected with each other, and they almost built on top of each other. So it starts with leadership in some way. And if you have a level 5 leader that's humble, that is professionally willed, he or she can invite the right people on the bus, right? And then start to decide where to go. If that is not happening, then no matter how good of a level 5 leader you might be, you're not going to get towards excellence. If you don't have the right people, you cannot have those conversations of confronting the brutal facts. You're going to be stuck in the defensive mode. And students, we call this the advocacy mode. The advocacy mode is what we fall into naturally. We are right, we know something, we're paid for a position, and so we are making our case, and maybe leadership and management is telling us, do this. Why? Because maybe I told you. But it doesn't open up the conversation, the possibility that this may not be the right thing to do, right? And if you are shifting students to the inquiry mode, it does make it easier. It does make it easier in a way, solving problems, and you're not having this kind of defensive mechanism there, and you say, all right, you know what? Let me try to understand. Let me try to understand what the problem here is, and let me try to get the right people to help me with understanding, solving it, right? This is very hard. And we talked about this, how hard this is on a personal level, and how difficult it is to be that quote-unquote right person, right? And so the importance then comes to the kind of team, the context that you're in, the organization that you're in, the culture. And we're going to talk about this more in the next couple of sessions. But closing, I want to thank you, Gina. I want to thank you, Brian. And want to share with you, students, that yes, this book is a classic. It's not a classic because most organizations are practicing these principles. In fact, most organizations aren't. They aren't even close to understanding what these principles mean. So please don't dismiss it out of hand. Engage with these principles at a deeper level. Try to understand what it means to be the right person. Try to understand what it means to be a leader that is humble, that is combining professional will and humility. Those people are very rare. One thing that Collins, though, says that we didn't talk about before is that he thinks the seeds of level 5 leadership are in everyone. They need to be nurtured, they can be practiced. It starts with that. It starts with this inquiry mode that we talked about. It starts with being comfortable with not attaching necessarily too much to your position, to your advocacy role, but being committed to excellence and letting go of everything else. And these are really sort of more like spiritual and mindfulness principles that people are resorting to now more often, because they see, the traditional management approach focusing on effectiveness and efficiency is missing something. And we're sort of filling in the picture here right now with what is missing so that we can move to better management, to management that allows for excellence in organizations.